All right, we're recording.
All right, thank you so much, Julio. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our joint parent council meeting with Muncie Park and Shelter Rock. I'm Rich Roeder, the principal of Shelter Rock School, along with Mr. Altman, the principal of Muncie Park. We do warmly welcome to our Zoom session this morning, where we are fortunate enough to have our Director of Math, Business and Home Careers, Mrs. Tallerini, who will be giving a very informative and thorough presentation as always to all of you. We also welcome Dr. Posse, our acting superintendent, and Dr. Apieras, our assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction and personnel. A big thank you to our SCA, in particular, Mrs. Croce and Mrs. Cyrus, for all their outstanding work this school year and their support. And thank you for having us this morning. This session will be recorded, so you'll be able to view this again on the curriculum instruction section on the district website. We will have an opportunity at the end of the presentation to field any questions that you may have. A big thank you to Julio for all of our tech support, as always. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Mrs. Tallerini.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mr. Roeder and Mr. Altman, for hosting this morning, and to Mrs. Croce and Mrs. Cyrus for the invitation to be with you today. I hope that you're all someplace warm and ready to sit back and enjoy. So today's presentation, I'm just going to share my screen with you. Just give me one moment. And Mr. Roeder, if you could give me a thumbs up to make sure that you can see it, that'd be great. Thank you. Great. I'm getting confirmation that I can see it. Excellent. All right. Okay. Just 1 second here. Just click. Okay. All right. We're good, Mr. Roeder. You can see. Just have to configure between the two monitors to make sure that you're looking at what I need you to see. Wonderful. Okay, so today's presentation is going to provide an overview of our elementary math program, covering some of the items that you'll see here on the screen. And hopefully that it's useful and engaging for those of you who have attended presentations similar to this in the past, as well as those of you for whom this might be their first math presentation. So the next slide is directed a little bit more at those of you who maybe I haven't met yet, just as a means of introduction and to give you a little background about myself. You'll see here on the screen, I put a few different pictures of things that are besides my role as the math lady. Some other pictures here. This is my 4th year as a Manhasset administrator, and prior to that, I was a high school teacher right here in the Manhasset School District. I'm the mom of 2 daughters, 9th grader Christina and 7th grader Lindsay. I'm a Girl Scout leader, a cookie mom, an avid baker, an avid reader, a singer, and I'm also very active in my undergraduate institution's alumni association, Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. So moving along to a little bit of a synopsis of our core math program. Our elementary buildings use the Math in Focus program as our core math curriculum. So this program utilizes a concrete, pictorial, abstract progression as it strives to provide a balanced understanding of the why and how of mathematical procedures. You'll see that visuals and alternative representations are very prevalent in your children's textbooks. Problem solving is embedded in each lesson, moving along from think activities to engage activities, then formalizing the learning and allowing students to really sink their teeth in and practice what they've learned with various applications. Number sense is also something that is held in high regard in the Math in Focus program. It's really fostered as a means of helping students to think flexibly and efficiently with respect to all of their computational processes. The newest edition of Math in Focus is now in use for all of the grades in the elementary buildings K through 6. And we're really grateful to the Board of Ed for supporting our continued work in making sure we're on the cutting edge of our Math in Focus materials. This new edition provides students and teachers with an upgraded online platform that you may recognize as Ed Your Friend. as well as consumable textbooks and extra practice books that serve as homework books. The prior knowledge assessment and connections between grade levels are really strong with Math in Focus, and it really helps to provide that cohesion across grade levels. This will be posted tomorrow in addition to the recording, but also a copy of the PDF of this presentation. And I've hyperlinked the parent resources that accompany the Math in Focus program so that you can use them at your leisure. There are grade level chapter specific resources that can help parents support their students at home, some highlights about each chapter, questions that you can ask to sort of further probe the learning, as well as some supplemental games and such that you might be able to play at home with your students, again, to support their understanding as we progress through the chapters. This is our second year using Reflex Math software. It's from the Explore Learning Company, and it's a supplemental program that we're using for grades 2 and up to build fact fluency. When we were looking for something to supplement for this regard, what really attracted us most to Reflex was its fact family approach. So it's not just sort of haphazardly drilling students. It really is very targeted so that students see the connection between numbers that are compatible. It incorporates real-time coaching. There are built-in incentives. Students build kind of avatars and can add to it as they earn tokens. It's just gamey enough to keep the students engaged, but it really still has that focus on the skills. And collectively this fall, even with a significant data disruption, our students have solved just shy of 900,000 facts collectively between the two buildings. So that is really, really wonderful news. And this year, also from the Explore Learning suite of activities, we've embarked on the use of Frax software. And this is similarly structured to Reflex, except it is working towards fraction mastery. So our teacher training was a little bit delayed due to the data disruption, but we were able to push that out in December. So we're rolling that out right now for grades 3 for 3+. And we recognize, again, the rationale for why we turned to this program was, I think that universally students have kind of an underdeveloped sense of magnitude, in particular when it comes to fractions. And this program really helps to build that understanding. As I've written here, we're not talking about dividing up blocks or cutting up candy bars all the time. We're really building up from unit fractions, such as 1/4. And that distinction is really, really important, because when we just talk about it in terms of breaking up an item, there becomes a little bit of a disconnect when we consider fractions that we might have referred to as improper, something like 5/4. So it's really important that students understand where numbers live, where fractions live on the number line, and this program helps to build that. Oftentimes there's, I consider, even in my own home, I mentioned I love to bake, and if I can remember having to double a recipe, and I'm baking with my girls, and 2/3 come up. Oh, let's double it, 2/3. And suddenly there's this moment of freezing where we feel like we need a piece of paper, instead of just thinking of 1/3 as a thing. In the same way, if I asked you to double 2 apples, you would arrive at 4 apples. In the same way, 2/3, 1/3 is a thing. So doubling 2/3 shouldn't be much different than doubling any other quantity. So those are just kind of important distinctions that we found that philosophy really supported in the Frax software. So we're looking forward to building this use as we move along this year. Okay, so our district is extremely fortunate to have 3 math specialists in each elementary building. The board and the district really remains committed to providing for the unique needs of all our learners, and they answered our call to add an additional math specialist in each building. We did not have to look far to add to our team. We are really thrilled to welcome 2 veteran teachers, Michael Cotteraro and Lori Swain, to our team of math specialists. And this group as a whole is really just a collection of some of the finest educators that I've come in contact with. We are so grateful to have them at our disposal. They are a wonderful liaison between me and the teachers. Here are some of the roles, which really is endless. Their contributions and work within their buildings is very far-reaching. But here's just a little synopsis of some of the items that they do provide for our children and teachers on a daily basis. Most notably, they're providing academic intervention services for our children. Tier 2 and Tier 3 services. This is kind of pull out small group instruction for students who need a little boost. They also serve as instructional coaches for our teachers. They're pushing into classrooms to co-teach math lessons, to model lessons for teachers who might be new to our district or new to a grade level. And they really serve as curriculum specialists. We're always working to make sure that we are on the forefront for Singapore math content, especially with our new edition rollout. And they have really been the boots on the ground for this initiative. They represent our department at IST meetings, CSE meetings, 504 meetings. They're assessing new students. New this year, they're actually one specialist in each building is instructing the sixth grade accelerated math class. And that provides a segue for me to discuss briefly, just to review the pathways for our grades 5 and 6 students. As you recall, and this is again, will not be new for this coming year, all of our grade 5 students are placed in heterogeneously grouped math classes. Grade 5 students that are in need of academic intervention for math receive these services in small groups outside of their regular math time to supplement their math class work. And all grade 5 classes incorporate at least 2 30-minute blocks of dedicated math enrichment time each week. And this has been, I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in a couple slides from now, but has been a real nice shift and a real welcome addition to our elementary math program. At the end of grade 5, students might be identified for the possibility of an early acceleration math pathway in grade 6. So here's a look at the identification process that we used this past year, and it worked out well. Students, so it's sort of divided into 2 phases. The first part is the students will and families will opt in to the COGAT exam that would be offered in late spring of 5th grade. We're still firming up the date for that for this mid-May, and we'll reach out certainly when we have that definitively on the calendar. Students that score at the 98th national percentile or higher on a quantitative nonverbal composite score will then proceed on to phase 2. Phase 2 has a number of components, one of which is the Renzulli-Hartman rating scale that we ask teachers to fill out for identified students. And it really gets at the heart of student behaviors, flexible thinkers, students with strong number sense, and a natural curiosity and interest in the subject. We also review work samples, either provided by the student and or by the teacher. And we do administer a secure exam in June that will assess curricular readiness for any missed content that would be skipped in the process of this early math acceleration pathway. And here's a little bit of the timeline of this. As I mentioned, in mid-May, the COGAT exam is provided in an opt-in model. Okay, we also invite our grade 4 students to get in on the action if their families do wish. Those 4th grade results are purely just for parental information. They are not utilized for any identification purposes, but we do welcome our 4th graders to participate. Early June, that secure exam is administered for invited students. In mid-June, our committee convenes to review the secure exam results, any teacher feedback, student work samples, and then by early July, notification about acceptance to the accelerated math pathway is sent out to families. And just to give you a little bit of a preview, grade 6 students that are enrolled in a grade level math class progress to either Math 7R or Math 7E, which is their more typical pathway for acceleration. To give you a sense of how that usually shakes out in terms of numbers, it's not nearly as stringent as our early acceleration pathway. This year, there are currently 5 sections of the 7R math and 5 sections of the 7E math, to give you a sense of how things typically land. And grade 6 students who are enrolled in an accelerated class, they progress as 7th graders to either Math 8H, which gives them an additional year of pre-algebra, and that's approximately a third of students who had been advanced previously, or Algebra Honors, which is the first in the 3-year Regent sequence for our math department. Okay, so there, as you can see, we really, I'm going to really keep this, tailored towards elementary, but just wanted to give you a little preview of what that shakes out to be. But rest assured that our secondary flow chart does provide quite a number of on-ramps for students who might come into their own a little bit later than in their upper elementary or middle school years. So another thing I wanted to talk about, classroom enrichment. You heard me mention the 5th grade enrichment component in their classrooms, but more broadly than that, one of my personal goals when I took on this administrative role was really to enrich the math curriculum with a lot of fun, critical thinking tasks. For me, math has always been sort of the vehicle through which we talk about problem solving and through which we foster critical thinking, and that can be done with a lot of fun. So every few weeks, I push out a selection of enriching curriculum materials to the elementary teachers that I've curated from a variety of sources. And our talented teachers have really been very open to incorporating these. A lot of them have really made it into their routine, and the students really look forward to whatever theme activity is coming out. Here's a sampling on the slide of some of the types of enrichment activities that your students may have been a part of. You'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, something that I kind of put together with the help of one of our high school library media specialists. So she had sent out a picture of our secondary school media center's book mystery. And I thought, wow, this could be a really cool, engaging task. And I pushed it out to our 5th grade teachers, and I invited the students to consider how they might think about estimating and taking a guess on how many books were in that tree. And students got super creative, and the more valuable part than actually guessing the right answer is really just the thinking that goes into this. Whether students thought about what went into sort of the bottom layer and considered how many layers, or whether they thought about it as sort of 4 quadrants of a tree, sort of the front, back, left, and right. And that's where the growth really happens, is sort of productively thinking about this and collaborating with their classmates. So a lot of teachers had their kids make Google slide presentations about their thinking, and of course sharing their guesses. So that's just again really neat and engaging, really asking students to consider what they're noticing about things, what they're wondering, rather than just focusing on, here's my answer, I boxed it in, and now I'm done. The great thing about that task is that it really was the definition of a low floor, high ceiling endeavor. Every student had sort of an entry point and something to contribute to that discussion. It wasn't considered, it's not an elite task. It's not only for the few, it really is, for many. So that's really what I hope that the students are taking away from these types of activities, is that they can always stretch their thinking to the next level and take on another person's point of view and consider how another might be thinking of something. Incidentally, in case anyone's curious, there were 137 books in the tree. I was pretty close. I guessed 144. So I guess my estimating skills were spot on. Okay, and just also wanted to share some other highlights. There have been many highlights. I don't always photograph them, but these are some of the items that I was able to capture. With the help of Mrs. Fassenfeld, some students in our kindergarten classes made number bracelets. And this built their understanding of adding with 2 or even more add-ins. This was a true differentiated lesson where students said, wait, I don't have to just break mine into 2 parts. I could break mine into 3 sections or 4 sections. And what are the most number of add-ins that I could use? This activity really had the added bonus also of some fine motor skills as students placed the beads onto the pipe cleaner, as well as social skills, because the students had to walk around and interact with classmates and ask them to verbalize the sentence that they had created on their bracelet. It was a great time. The students really enjoyed it, and I loved being with them to help hear their thinking and their insight. Also, you'll notice on the right-hand side, Mrs. Swain, one of our new elementary math specialists, in addition to Mrs. Werther, have created a school store of sorts where students are working on inventory, coins, making change, and totaling items as a way to really get into some real world practice of their math skills. And here are some examples and photos of some push-in lessons, some small group lesson. You'll notice personal dry erase boards. You'll notice some manipulatives. You'll notice students interacting and working together. You'll see me there. I'm actually reading. I went around to some of the first grade classes and did a little read aloud of a book, 10 Friends, and led the students through a companion activity where they kind of put the book into action and made their own creation of the story's premise. Excuse me. And here are some more highlights. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner some of our fourth grade teams, really creative bulletin boards, reindeer remainder that had the students showcase their newfound understanding of long division. You see students collaborating on a selection of problems written on chart paper, and students really just showcasing their and being proud of their work that they had done after our 10 Friends read aloud. All right, so I am frequently asked for recommendations for what are some things that parents and families can do to sort of foster their students' love for math that might already exist, or to sort of spark a little bit of curiosity and math thinking. So I put together a list of some of my favorites of the moment, of sort of games, and some of the websites that I frequent for personal and professional use. Again, these will be shared tomorrow so that you can take a look at them and dig in a little bit more. And so these are some of the items. Some of these I've purchased for our classrooms, for enrichment. Some are on their way. And I know sometimes we look for sort of fancy things. Don't underestimate the power of things that can really foster reasoning in your students that don't cost anything. I'm thinking of loading the dishwasher, having your students wrap holiday presents or birthday presents. Those are all real, not only helpful, but real ways for kids to really foster their spatial reasoning. Packing a trunk for a vacation. You may sacrifice a roll of wrapping paper in the process. I speak for experience, but I think that these are really ways that you can sort of stretch your students' thinking, in particular spatial. Oftentimes when we think of math, we think a lot about facts and numeric applications, but I think it's absolutely critical that we think about sort of the visual component of math, and the data component of math that really can stretch kids to the next level and just get them thinking and processing. I know that there are a lot of cool apps out there. I'm kind of old school in getting kids to really kind of manipulate things and touch items with their own hands in real time can be super helpful. So again, those are just some of the thoughts that come to mind in terms of some of my favorite games and activities at this point. Last year, when I was with the SCA, I shared a quote from a book that I had been reading at that time. And I've since had a lot of families sort of asking, hey, what are you reading? That I've actually now incorporated it onto my signature on my email. And in terms of just getting book recommendations, I'm an avid reader. Dr. Chowsky and I really do get along well. And so here are some of the books that I'm reading at this time. I typically have a few going at the same time. I have a fairly decent commute, so I usually have a couple of audiobooks going, as well as fiction, nonfiction, actual paper copies. So I just wanted to put up here are some of the books that I'm reading at the time, and just focusing a little bit on gratitude, on parenthood, and as well as just really thinking about building thinking classrooms in mathematics. So I invite you to feel free and always send me, if you have good book recommendations, you can feel free to send them my way as well. I'm always looking for ideas. So at this time, thank you so much for attending. I have my contact information here. And I invite you, of course, to reach out at any time if you want to go over something more specific to your child. I'm always happy to kind of talk things out. Those of you who have taken advantage of that will know that I really do approach things on a student by student basis. And I don't always have the exact answer for you, but I'll help you to kind of find that right answer if that works for you, your child, and your family. So thank you so much for having me again. I'm going to stop the share so we can all see each other again.
All right. Well, Mrs. Tellerini, thank you so much. As always, a very thorough and informative presentation. I love the tree activity. It's phenomenal. And I like that you shared so many resources with our families. So much appreciated. At this time, we're going to open it up to any and all questions that you may have for Mrs. Tellerini.
You can raise your hand using the 3-dot function or the response function on Zoom, and you can raise your hand and then I'll unmute you.
And of course, everyone knows they can always reach out if they want to discuss something a little bit more targeted. I see someone has their hand raised. And Mrs. Randall?
Hi.
Hi.
How are you? Happy
Good.
New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
I have a question. What's the student population of Shelter Rock versus Muncie Park?
In total?
How many students are there? Yeah.
In total enrollment?
655 at Shelter Rock.
655 at Shelter Rock, and a little bit higher. Is it in the 800s, Mr. Altman, at Muncie Park?
Yeah, we're low 800s, I believe. I don't have the exact figure for today on me.
I mean, I don't mean to be funny, but I'm delighted that there's more math specialists at each school, but wouldn't it make more sense for Muncie to have 4 to have an equal amount of math specialists per kid, that Muncie Park is under service compared to Shelter?
We did examine that, and we did actually look at the population of students that were in tier 2 and tier 3 services. And at this point, we are, we're able to manage all that we need, given kind of student groupings and such, because I did get pretty granular in my proposal with that. So at this point, we're able to manage, and we're able to more than manage the needs of the teachers. But we're obviously keeping an eye on that, absolutely, to make sure that
once it comes out that Muncie Park, I know that Shelter has more, you call them tier 2 and tier 3 students, but just as a pure per capita, it threw up that Muncie has less. I have another question about acceleration. One about acceleration, that when you speak about acceleration, last time you spoke about math, it might have been pre-COVID at this point, you also spoke about acceleration skips content. And I always kind of bristle at that, because acceleration merely means to go faster. And I don't necessarily see why that acceleration means to skip content. But my main question with acceleration is that in English, there's differentiated learning for each grade, and that there's clusters of students at multiple, in the lower grades, they're alphabetized, and kids are on reading level A, B, C through the alphabet. And in math, there is no differentiated learning for the kids. There's the deep dives that you give them, but if kids are ready to move on, how do you differentiate learning for the different skill sets of the kids? Sure. And the different needs of the kids, that if some kids need to go on a slower path, they also need that.
Sure, absolutely. So our Math and Focus program does have, as part of it, we have reteach resources as well as enrichment resources. one of the advantages to the new edition is that there is an enrichment piece for every single lesson, as opposed to the previous edition that had an enrichment piece for each chapter that was a little more broad. I would also venture to say that the classroom dialogue, because our Math in Focus program is inherently language rich, and it really does focus quite a bit on the questioning that happens in the classroom, which isn't always something that a student, you might come like and may not be visible to sort of a parent at home, what's happening, within the classroom in terms of the questioning that's happening during class. But certain students are going to be geared, perhaps being asked different questions or asked to make connections between questions, and work in the classroom is being tailored towards what the students need. The first part of your question involved acceleration and sort of the philosophy. I know that you've been a part of several of my discussions over the past few years, and as you recall, and as many people on the call will refer, this is obviously a program that I had inherited, and we have really made some significant strides in our processes for the acceleration in that time. We have, when it was originally designed, and I'll spare everyone the sort of the large history, but when the program had been designed originally, there was more of a need for it because the program that we used at that point was not quite as rigorous as the one that's in use right now. So there was more of a need for it, where students really did, there were a very small selection of students who had mastered content and were ripe and ready for the skipping of content. Like many things, programs can kind of take on a life of their own a little bit. And we had really made a concerted effort with the support of Dr. Posse and the elementary principals, really to sort of move away from some of the practices that we found that were really detrimental to students growing as math learners. We have, and we spoke to all of our constituent groups at that time to really try and weigh the pros and cons of a program, and kind of recognizing that for some students, this is appropriate. For some students, it is not indeed skipped content because they had accessed that content elsewhere. And our goal was always really to identify students for whom this is most appropriate. Again, it had, like many things take on a life of their own, but we're proud of the strides that we've made so far in terms of identification measures. We've moved the identification piece away from individual classroom tests, and I think our 4th and 5th grade teachers can really attest to this, to the importance and the advantage that has had in their classroom building. Whereas previously there were perhaps kids sort of breaking down on test days, and now we have kids that are really learning. And I think that we're going to continue, like all good organizations, we're going to continue to kind of monitor the health of these pathways. We did successfully move it up 1 year, again, recognizing that critical content does happen each year. So I absolutely, that resonates to me. But the idea with that secure exam is really to recognize that students where it's appropriate, where they won't be, let's say, missing because they've already shown evidence that they have accessed that content, are participating. So I hope that helps a little bit. Again, it's something that we continue to talk about and dialogue, albeit quite less than 4 years ago. So I hope that we can, continue, again, looking at each of our learners sort of individually. I saw another hand before. Mr. Plunkett, did you have a question? I don't see him on the call anymore.
Julio, are you seeing any other families?
No
that
other
have
hands.
questions? Okay, well, as Mrs. Pellegrini mentioned, any of our families who do reflect on the presentation and have further questions, please reach out to Mrs. Pellegrini directly, and she will gladly get back to you. I just wanted to say thank you to all of our math specialists who do a tremendous job, and to all of our teachers who continue to enrich and deliver our math curriculum. And a big thank you to you, Lauren, for all the work that you've done. So
Thank you.
we appreciate you here this morning. Thank you to our SCA for having us. And I also wanted to recognize Pat Aiken, who's on the call, president of our Board of Education. So thank you for being here. Have a great morning, everybody. Stay warm. Thank
Rich,
you.
let's pause for 2 minutes. I see a couple of hands just got raised.
Okay.
Scott Lynn. Give me a second.
Hi, so I'm considering signing up I'm considering signing up my fourth grader for Mathletes on Thursday mornings. I was just wondering how that program, you know, if you can just describe in more detail, you know, what you think of that program in terms of how it may be beneficial for him in terms of getting ready for the COGAT test and accelerated math in general.
Sure. I think that, you know, the way we approach Mathletes is it really should be fun. It should come from the student wishing to partake in something of that nature. It focuses on non-routine problem solving and more traditional problem solving as well, getting students to really have fun with it, take part in low-key sort of competitions, and more importantly, just really kind of stretch their thinking a little bit. At this point, I'm not sure which building you know that your child is in, but at this point, I know that the Mathletes programs are well underway at this point. So we may want to chat offline about you know registration for that. But I wouldn't say that, you know, in terms of there being sort of correlation, you know, with acceleration and such, I would you know, do it again purely based on, you know, interest, and kind of let your child kind of lead the way in what they're interested in. We want kids who certainly want to be there and will enjoy it, and if their thinking is stretched as part of it, I hope that's the case, and that they kind of look at math a little bit, you know, a little bit differently. It gives them, you know, some opportunities to step away from the content that is talked about in the classroom. Okay, hope that helps.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Ms. Herbert?
Hi, sorry, I was just trying to unmute. So thanks for the presentation. I have a fourth grader and I'm trying to understand how the evaluation process would work in the fifth grade. So you mentioned both the COGAT test and then the teacher forms, but they were at like a high level. So I'm trying to understand on the COGAT test, what does that encompass? Is that only math, or is it math and reasoning and English? And then on the teacher forms, what kinds of things do the teachers comment on the form? So I would know how best to prepare her for both of those.
Sure, of course. So for the COGAT, it's the cognitive abilities test, and that has three components to it: a verbal component, a quantitative component, and a nonverbal component. And it really is assessing sort of how students think and getting into their head a little bit. We use national percentiles on that. And I would say that, you know, when we look at that, we're looking most closely, and again, we did this after sort of a concerted effort, looking at the students who have fared well in the program in the past, and we look at a combination score of involving the quantitative as well as the nonverbal piece. And you heard me mention spatial reasoning a lot, and sort of the ability to sort of break things apart, sort of an underrated skill in mathematics. So we use those two components. And it's not a straight up average, but we do get that from the company. They run several different composites, but those are the two that we utilize. And in terms of the Renzulli-Hartman scale, what I can do is actually, I don't have it in front of me, but what I can do is, you know, I can certainly send you a part of it. I think it's actually probably online as part of an earlier presentation. But what that basically does, it's a list of sort of characteristics and traits of sort of mathematical thinkers. You know, students thinking flexibly, students thinking of different ways, students approach a problem in different ways, students aren't afraid to productively struggle and such. And what teachers will comment on is sort of the degree to which the students are exhibiting those, whether it's, you know, most of the time, all of them, frequently, that kind of thing, rarely, not at all. Does that give you a sense of what we're looking for? And I can, like I said, if you Google it, you can find it, but I can certainly send you a copy of the one that we use.
Okay, sorry, trying to unmute there and it says host can't be, well, has to unmute you. So, no, that is helpful. I'm trying to get a sense, is there a way to prepare for the COGAT? Are there certain materials or, someone talked about Mathletes or other things like that? And as far as the teachers, is it 1 year teachers or is it 2 years worth of teachers? And yeah, if you could just let me know on that.
Sure. The preparation question. Ideally, we like our students to really, come in, and this should really assess their thinking. It shouldn't really be something that's rehearsed. We really want to get an authentic sense of a student's capabilities. And in terms of teacher rating, we do ask that it's at the tail end of the school year, so we do ask that particular teacher if we felt the need to kind of dig deeper. We would. There was, that would, but we didn't feel the need to do that this year. But we certainly could, or if a parent had a particular request to do that, that's not a problem because we're dealing with a relatively small pool of children, by that point.
All right, and my last question is,
Sure.
How many students get placed into it? Like, is there only one class of 24 for Shelter and Muncie, or is it however many meet the like whatever the bar is,
Right.
or how do you decide that?
Sure. So we don't have a cap. Typically, it is one section per building. Typically, however, we have had some years where we've had 2 sections in one building and 1 in the other. I don't believe in sort of capping it because each sometimes there are cohorts that just might be stronger than others. So if there were a need, we would certainly plan for that need. This year we have roughly in the 30s of students between the 2
In each
buildings.
school?
In total.
Oh, total of 15 and
So there's
15,
one
okay.
class, well, roughly one class in each building. Okay.
All right, thank you.
And yeah, and that's fair, fairly typical, but like I said, I'm not opposed if the numbers showed it. We're not going to adjust the criteria to sort of say, oh no, we can only house this many students. If there are students that are deserving, we'll accommodate.
Got it, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Scott?
Hi, good morning. Happy New Year.
Morning.
So I think Jennifer asked most of my questions, but one question I have is I have a 3rd grader and I see for ELA, they are starting to prepare for the New York State exam. Is there any preparation that will be occurring for the math portion of the exam, or does Math in Focus pretty much cover it?
We actually do in 3rd grade. Each 3rd grader will also has a sort of a, for lack of a better phrase, sort of a test prep workbook that the teachers do supplement the Math in Focus with. More so, less about the content and more so just about question styling, so that students will go in a little bit more versed in the style of questions that they'll see. So that may or may not have come home at this point, but that is being used, in class, and will, as now we've crossed into the new year and we do start looking at that. Again, our program is really rigorous and rich as it is, but we do endeavor to use as many sort of valuable resources as we can find to provide sort of a balanced approach for the students.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Ms. Nicholas?
Hi, thank you for the presentation today. Just quickly, so if they're not doing the accelerated program, it looks like there's 2 different levels in 6th grade. And how are those 2 levels determined? Sorry.
So in 7th grade, following in 7th grade, you mean?
Oh, that's 7th grade?
That
I'm
is in
sorry, did I
7th
misread
grade.
that? Okay, sorry.
And that is a little bit less stringent. We do use a combination of really any data that we have on the student at that time. I converse with the teachers and we make that determination. Roughly, to give you a sense, roughly students with test scores that are averaging around 90 or higher will be placed in that 7 accelerated class. And students that are lower than that will be in our 7R class. There is some wiggle room. We have much more flexibility at the secondary school. If something didn't work out, we do have the flexibility to manipulate a student's schedule. We try not to do that, so we do try and get it right the first time. But we do recognize that there is a host, a whole host of changes that do occur between 6th and 7th. So and that would also be mailed out again in like early July. I try and get those letters out so that families are, they're well aware in advance of September the course that their student is intended to enroll in.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Sure, of course.
And that is all the hands.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you to our SEA for having us. Have a great morning. Thanks again, Mrs. Tallerini. Just so everyone is aware, though, we will have this presentation on the district website, and the previous math presentation that Mrs. Tallerini has done is also viewable on the district website. Have a great morning.